So welcome back. We're holding on page Kuftez Zayin in the segment of Igeres HaKodesh, which is the fourth segment of Tanya. I will just note, in the last few classes, I mentioned this, that it's always good to have an understanding of the way these different segments in Tanya is set up. Tanya has 5 segments. It's known, we mentioned in the past as well, came from Chassidim, that this is the Torah Shebiksav of Torah Chassidus, the written Torah of Torah Chassidus, and therefore similar to the Torah Shebiksav in general is divided into 5, Chamisha Chumshe Torah. So too, Tanya has 5 segments, and we did, of course, namely for the newcomers, again recently explain the uniqueness, distinctiveness of this Igeres HaKodesh, of this segment called the Holy Epistles of the Alter Rebbe. You can see it in the very beginning of this. We had a quick presentation on that in the beginning of this very epistle, number 10, first class. I believe this is the 7th. So we don't have to repeat it. Generally, it's not mandatory to repeat this as we learn the content of this. This as any other Igeres of the Alter Rebbe, any part of Tanya, but it's always good to have an understanding and a backdrop and appreciation of the particular study that one's presently studying. And in this case, in the very beginning of this chapter, we did have that overall. We mentioned a few times in the past, but an easy reference is the beginning of Perek S. In other words, the beginning of this 10th Igeres, which is today would be the 7th class on that. So the first class, again, it's a click away. The first class, if you want to have a little bit of, again, a recap or an overall appreciation of what Igeres HaKodesh is all about. We mentioned also then there is definitely a theme across Igeres HaKodesh. The Alter Rebbe touches upon many subjects. These are letters written different times, different communities, even though, again, all the words of the Alter Rebbe are there for eternity. This becomes part of the Alter Rebbe's works, part of the Sefer Tanya, but and it captures, probably all of Torah mitzvahs, learning Torah, doing mitzvahs and tzedakah. But there is, again, we mentioned then, there is definitely a theme of tzedakah threaded through the entire Igeres HaKodesh. You can look there, of course, no point to repeat. Also, we do mention wherever you're watching the class, there's an advantage of the original website, tanyaonline.com. One word, tanyaonline, one word that is, .com. The advantage also has the text and a separate scroll bar. It's easy to follow as such. But as we mentioned, wherever you're learning Tanya, Koilachai, this is the Sefer. We did mention this in the past. This is always worth renoting. This Tanya is the perfect manual to our Avodas Hashem. The perfect manual to our service of our Creator. For the reason man comes down, Alei Adamnis, to this world, ultimately, Anini Vresi L'Shamash Eskeni. I was created to serve my master, and like everything else, especially something that complex, we don't have to explain why it's a complex task, complex shlichus. So, like anything else, a sophisticated machine or workings of a machine, it needs an important manual, and a perfect manual brings perfection to the service, to the function. So too, there is many svarim written, and each one was there to elevate a person, b'derech ha'ela beis kale, to the way, and to bring him onto that path, onto that way which brings him closer to his Creator, which is, of course, the overall is learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. And as we know, Avodas Hashem encapsulates the entire 24 hours of the day. But the perfect manual is Tanya. The perfect manual from all these farms is Tanya. Again, we mentioned how can we say this? How could you come out so strong, if you will, to say that statement? And of course, we're not undermining anybody, any tzaddik, and any leader which wanted to bring Yidden closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, understandably. So you can have a manual that brings great production, but then you have the perfect manual, which brings out, demonstrates every part of this machine, if vehicle, whatever it is, in its full function, and it's a perpetuous full function or expression of full function, and a perfect expression of full function. This is what the Tanya is all about. And we mentioned again, being the Alter Rebbe was an Neshama Chadasha coming before Yemei Mashiach, which of course by then will all perfectly serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu without any flaws or ulterior motives, or generally the ups and downs one has in his Avodas Hashem. Then there will be that perfect relationship and symmetry between creation and creator. So Alter Rebbe, as a Neshama Chadasha, comes down prior to that, like Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, prior hundreds of years, right? You see actually pretty much similar amount of year. Avraham Yitzchak Yaakov, as an example, come down to the world to set the way for Am Yisrael to begin that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What happened hundreds of years later by Matan Torah, but they were there as a preparing the whole entire system to lead to the day of Matan Torah. Of course, the Alter Rebbe, the Rabbeim, they were there to lead the way to the Yemei Mashiach. So Tanya is not just another sefer. We mentioned this in the past as well. So again, wherever you're learning Tanya, Koy L'Choy, we are, hopefully today we tried to conclude last week. This chapter, I believe today will succeed. Who knows though? But we'll B'ez Hashem succeed. Look forward to succeeding. This is Alter Rebbe speaks about in the previous chapter. I will mention this, that we have to compel ourselves in the beginning of every class to keep it very brief, the connection of the previous class to the present, for the simple reason, it's really a click away. As we mentioned different times, it's not only like the old tape recorders, you had to take a minute and then find a place and so on. Today, it's just a click away on the site. This is also the advantage of this site, TanyaOnline.com. You have all the previous classes lined up in a very organized manner. Thus, it's so simple to figure out what the whole Tanya, the Perek, is talking about, especially if you're following this chapter as an example. But if you to get to the to where we're leading into, which for that matter today it's a culmination of the entire chapter. But we did mention this in the end of the previous chapter. Click away, end of class number 6. In the number 6, also in class number 5, click away to get the understanding of where we're holding at this time, and the conclusion of the Alter Rebbe of this chapter, encapsulating the entire message of the Tanya. So let's try to jump into it, because again, to see the connection, it's really a click away. This midah of chesed, b'li gvul midah, without any measurement, and without any border, or to be exact, without any border, without any measurement. This chesed, what chesed, right? The previous class, go back to the previous class, you have it in elaboration, but we're talking again in brief of this expression of kindness without any border limitation, which is of course the kindness expressed through the action of tzedakah, of charity. In this case, we're not talking about the mitzvah of tzedakah, as we mentioned then. The mitzvah of tzedakah, because it's a mitzvah, and every mitzvah has parameter, it has a border, as we mentioned. The Alter Rebbe brings the pasuk, Mimine Eishtas Lame. Tate is a combination of both. It's mimin, it's an extension of the deepest chesed, the inner workings of Hashem. B'li gvul, no comparison to any expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his conduct of the world, vis-a-vis the expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu associated with Torah, the meaning for which Hashem created the world for, which is a different dimension, it's not quantitatively measured, different quality. This is the inner core of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which he invested in Torah. The Gemara says, Anochi, which is again the first word Hashem, began this relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that juncture of Matan Torah, the formal connection, the formal investment in Am Yisrael, the formal investment in the world, again, the fusion of the inner workings of Hashem with Olam, with this world, and by all means, all the Olam Esalyenim v'Tachteinim, on that very day of Matan Torah, the infamous day of Matan Torah, the famous expression, Matan Torah, will never happen again. That was the breakthrough. And the Gemara says, Anochim, it means the fusion of creator and creation. The Yidden would be able to have the Torah, learn the Torah, do its mitzvahs, till the production of the Torah will come to its full expression, full fruition when Mashiach comes. To that day of Matan Torah, that Hashem began that exposure, presentation of the Anochi Hashem Elikecha, I am Hashem your God. Anochi, the Gemara says, Anon nafshi ksavis yav, as I put my soul, I wrote it into Torah, I gave it over to you. You have the core inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the deepest levels of chesed. That's why Teda is miminai, the deepest levels of expression of Hashem. Of course, that's the point of chesed, extending myself, in this case, the core of Hashem. Different idea than any other chesed Hashem ever expressed prior to giving the Torah. And when we learn in Torah, we tap into it, because this is what Torah is. Then there's the Eish dimension of Torah, which is the Gvura. There's parameters in every single mitzvah, in its measurement, its form of execution, if it's tefillin, if it's the mezuzah, the karbanas. And again, the Alter Rebbe had in this very chapter, one of the classes, 2, 3 or so, you can see it. Click any of them to find, you can see it also, the corresponding text. The Alter Rebbe runs through a few of the mitzvahs to show us the dimension of Gvura, border, parameter, in these mitzvahs. And then you have even tzedakah has its measurement. We're obligated to give a tenth. To do the mitzvah tzedakah in a choicy manner, it would be a fifth, which is 20%, but not more. Everyone stop literally on the dot, and chas v'shalom does a sin, he makes $100 and he gives $21. There's no sin there, but in the overall, it's 20%. Not more, not in a different measurement, not 30%, in the context of tzedakah. But in the context of this chesed, believe HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for tikkun nefesh, for correction of the soul. Again, you have to see to the very end of the last class. Click away. That it's a different phenomenon. Tikkun nefesh, the masakin, there's no end. There's no 30%, 40% video. Everything we want to give away in order to correct his soul. Why does the soul need correction? We know why the soul needs correction. Again, you got to see the class and what this does when a person calls of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and again he connects to the HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a deeper level than the norm, which is on the emotional plane, and then he makes the connection in his expression on the actual plane, which is the actual extending himself with his chesed, with his kindness, tzedakah, with his money. How much? Also, beligvul, not with no parameters, no borders, everything to give away for tikkun nefesh. It's a different dimension. It's not the mitzvah tzedakah. It's extending oneself to correct his soul, his or her soul, and they're able to do it beligvul, like he says, just like he gives he makes the comparison. How much would one give away in order to save his body? There is no limit. He would give everything away. Again, you can see at the end of the last class, they said the words of the Alter Rebbe. You could just follow also the text there. So too for tikkun nefesh, it's chesed beligvul. So it's, even though we're taking the time over here, of course, you can't get the perfect understanding even what we're saying presently. Even though it's enough to come into this to this class, but you have to see the previous classes or the previous class of this idea of the chesed, which is corresponding to the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's different levels of kindness in the expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's the chesed olam, which is even associated with the chesed of Torah, which is also believable in comparison. No comparison, like we just said. It's not a quantitative difference between Hashem's kindness, which is invested in Torah, or via Torah, to Hashem's kindness, which is invested in creation. No comparison at all. So it's also a believable and infinite type of chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But then there is, on top of that, the Rav chesed, the true infinite chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which that fills in all the cavities, which were established by the person's lack of commitment to this which Hashem asked him or her to do. It's learning Torah and doing mitzvahs and so on. Again, this is all, you can see it in the previous classes. Or other blemishes the person made to his soul, and even if he starts doing things from now on perfectly, but what happens to those cavities? What happens to those fragmentations, those blemishes? Hashem says you could bring that true infinite Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into your neshama, and so too into the elements of the world's inferior and superior, as the Alter Rebbe explains. Everything the neshama has its counterpart on high, on all levels. And that infinite light fills in everything. How lucky we are. But how do we do that? It's not a regular service. It's the deeper heart calling for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As you got to see it in the last few classes. The Rebbe says it's usually expressed, which is the calling of the Baal Tshuva, on an emotional plane, but also it has to express itself. It has to be manifest also on a physical plane. And that is the giving of charity, believable without any end, without any border, without any limit. That is the chesed, which is the counterpart of Hashem's bli gvul chesed, which this is what we're trying to elicit in order to fill in all those cavities, to be misakin the nefesh. So this chesed is called, it has the same, it's called upon the name of Hashem's Rav Chesed. This chesed, which we express in this manner of believable, without any board, without any measurement, is Nikrei Sal Shmei Shel Kodesh Baruch Hu. This is called by the name of Kodesh Baruch Hu, which is Chazdei Hashem, which is that second chesed, right? Chazdei Hashem. There are two expressions of chesed of Hashem, like the Rebbe began the chapter with, explaining that pasuk of Chazdei Hashem Kilei Samnu, that second chesed Rav chesed, which is again alluded in the Chazdei plural. There's the chesed olam, and then there's the Rav chesed. That Rav chesed, which we express through our bli gvul, infinite expression of, in other words, giving without any limit, without any measurement, is called by the name of Kodesh Baruch Hu, Chazdei Hashem, which is alluding to the Rav chesed of Hashem. The chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu from one world to the next. Now this is talking about the higher, this deeper level of chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It has an impact. All those worlds where there was that fragmentation, which was caused by the actions or inactions. Again, it's a asayim, it's a leises, even though here the more the emphasis is on the positive mitzvahs, which created these cavities. This chesed has the ability to bring the energy from one world to the other, all the way to be mashlim, completely, to complete, to correct and complete my neshama, bring completion to my neshama. Chesed Hashem Elam Adel. That's the chesed that we are able to express, to call, to elicit that Rav Chesed, which would bring the hashpah, the energy ba'elam ba'adelam, this which was lacking of our misdeeds. And if you remember, should we maybe before we read it inside? Today I was explaining the pasuk Chazdei Hashem Kilei Samnu, the kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you read it on the surface, it seems like, oh, I know that Chesed Hashem Kilei Kilei Chol Rachamech. We say it every day in davening, 3 times a day. Hatayv, you're good. Kilei Chol, your Rachamim has not concluded. Hamrachem Hatayv Kilei Chol Rachamecha. Your mercy, there's no it did not stop. There's no end. There's no stopping to your expression of mercy. And then we go on. You continue to be merciful because your kindness doesn't end. That seems to be the message on the surface, but you look a little deeper, you see that Nun, Chazdei Hashem Kilei Samu, would be similar to this which we recite in the Amida, and would make sense. The kind of they're never complete, they're never ending, but there's a Nun. What's the message of the Nun? So Rebbe says the message of the Nun it's a different message. Leisamnu is referring to us. We're lacking tmimus. Leisamnu is not referring to the Chesed. Leisamnu is referring to the Avodah of the Yidin. Leisamnu, we Yidin are incomplete. Therefore, we have to adapt to Chazdei Hashem, to that Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order that we should become Tmimim, that Hashem should be able to, we would be able, through this Chesed, our Chesed, believable, without any limitation, without any measurement, to elicit that infinite kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which would fill in all those, or correct those blemishes, and fill in all those cavities that we should become Tmimim. Different meaning of the pasuk. So let's see it inside. So this chesed, this manner of expression of chesed, is the chesed that Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Even though every yid, by nature, is merciful and one who extends kindness, this is the DNA of the yid. For that matter, the Alter Rebbe writes in the first chapter in Likutei Amarim, the very first chapter, and this is the 4th segment. We merited to conclude first, second, and third. We're holding in this segment. He gives us a Kodesh number 10. Actually, it's 10 out of 32. But in the first chapter, Likutei Amarim, the Alter Rebbe points out that it's so embedded in the Yid, this idea to have pity, mercy, to the expression of mercy and kindness. It's even, you don't even have to reach the identification of the godly soul to find Gemilas Chasadim and Rachmanis in the Yid. There's so much part of our DNA that it's even embedded and associated and aligned with our animalistic soul. The Nefesh HaBahamis of the Yid already has the Rachmanim Again, you can see it there. It's great novelties of the Alter Rebbe, how he puts it like everything else so clear and so transparent, and something which we so clearly can identify. When you see somebody in a terrible situation, you take out $1 and you give it. Not necessarily you have to arouse your godly soul to make that major change, or rather make that major decision, and you saw the light and you saw the dark, they were both in front of you, and Bacharta B'chaim, you had to make that clear decision to choose life, or light and dark. Means the way the pasuk uses life and the opposite of life, right? Tov and good and evil, and you have to make that choice to assist that other party. Usually it doesn't happen like that. Now, when we speak about anything associated with Torah mitzvahs, it does happen like that. It doesn't mean that it takes time. Most of our choices are in the millisecond. Many of them need to be in the millisecond, because if we cross the line with that millisecond, we violated very much, especially when it comes to subtle decisions or decisions associated with the subtleties of our soul, vision, audio, thought, and so on. But extending oneself to see someone in a very difficult situation, take out the dollar or the quarter, whatever it is, and based on how much one can give, it's not that, doesn't work in that manner, because this is something who we are, even from the nefesh habahamis, even from the animal soul which exists within the yid, which is the other neshama. Again, you have to see it in the very beginning of Tanya, which is again the theme throughout the entire Tanya, where the Alter Rebbe so brilliantly demonstrates the different dimensions every yid has, and allows us to tap into, to be aware of them so clearly and so conspicuously, for us to be able to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu without any complications. I mentioned many times it's hard to use the word brilliant when you're talking about the Kedusha of Ish Kodesh of the Alter Rebbe, but nonetheless, in context, of course, the brilliance of Avodas Hashem coming through the guide of the Alter Rebbe, the perfect guide of the Alter Rebbe, perfect manual of the Alter Rebbe, the perfection demonstrated in every step of the game in this very manual, holy manual, the Tanya Kadisha. So again, this terminology is in context, but the Alter Rebbe, also this idea that you don't have to reach the Nefesh Elikis. Of course, it's so much multiplied when you're talking about the divine neshama, which is part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is all about chesed. So of course it's magnified and multiplied infinitely greater and more and deeper than the natural instinct of the Nefesh Bahamis to be a Rachman and a Gemel Chesed, of course. And many times we have to tap into it, because the challenge of expressing our kindness becomes a real challenge, and we have to really introduce our godly soul. But when you're talking about regular cases which elicit the natural mercy and want to be extend kindness, is really embedded in the very makeup of the yid. But nonetheless, there's a limitation. Yesh gvul midah l'rachmei ha'adam. And this is pretty much aligned with what we're saying, because Nefesh Bahamis, at the end of the day, the regular makeup of the yid as a human being, of course everything is limited. Every positive expression is limited, because it doesn't carry the infinite energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As opposed to when you're talking about the godly soul. The godly soul is a chelik al-kamimal. It's part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Ein Sof. There we can tap into true Ein Sof. Mesiras Nefesh, for example, self-sacrifice, which is, of course, an infinite, the most maximum infinite expression of submission of a yid to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is through Mesiras Nefesh. That would only be able to be expressed because of our neshama, via our neshama, our godly soul, because anything else, even not necessarily something totally negative, but let's say the nefesh bahamis, us as human beings, there's no reason, it doesn't begin to make sense that one should be ready to expire for any calling, even something that important and noble of the godly choice over any other choice, because that's the nature. The innate nature of every being is to exist and to live, and not to do everything for self-preservation, if you will, and not to do anything which would lead to self-expiration. It's only the infinite koyach that Shalikis has, the godly soul has, to express these expressions which carry and very demonstrably carry that infinite koyach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when you're talking about that natural rachmanos, the natural expression of mercy and kindness by the Yid, of course there is a measurement, and of course there is a limit. There's a limited measurement to the kindness of man. Of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem himself, and Ein Sof Baruch Hu is called the infinite light. Blessed be He, all the midas of Ein Sof, and therefore Hashem's midas, Hashem's characteristics, which is chesed, which would be known of the characteristics of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, corresponding. That's the reason why we have that same setup. Our cognitive faculties, Chochmah Bina Das, and then our emotions, characters, emotions, would be because it exists on high. Hashem's Chochmah Bina Das and Hashem's midas. So because Hashem is infinite, therefore His emotions, His characters is also infinite. When it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it says His mercy, there is no end to Hashem's mercy because He's infinite. And therefore we have that within ourselves also. That chip, because we have a chelik of the kamimal, because we have a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu within us, we have the ability to do things in an Ein Sof manner without any limitations, which is generally the life of the Yid and the overall, especially the difficult difficult parts of history, when Yid really had to express that complete self-submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which caused their total expression known as Mesiras Nefesh. This can only come to actualization only because a person has a neshama, which is the infinite koyach of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He can express his devotion to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his choice for the divine calling, choice for the holy, for the sacred, without any limits. Ein Sof, because he has part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Ein Sof, and therefore in this case also, the ability for Yid to still let go and say, oh, koila sheyitin lemanafshe, I'm giving everything away for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This dimension of the idea of tzedakah, not the mitzvah of tzedakah, but this idea of tzedakah for tikkun nefesh, it is because we have a nefesh likis, a godly soul, which this is the chazli Hashem. This corresponds. We have within ourselves that chesed bli gvul, similar to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's chesed bli gvul, which is the Rav chesed, the higher level of the chesed. Now, once we know this, now the Alter Rebbe comes and again puts it in the pasuk. We did these classes. We couldn't hold ourselves back. It was quite a few times, even though this is the place of the culmination. But it was the translation is such a sweet translation. Alter Rebbe takes a pasuk and he says, "Chasdei Hashem kilisam." It seems like kilisam. It's just So the nun fell in there. The nun fell in there. No, there's no typos in Hashem's in Tanakh. The Alter Rebbe finds the nun and says, no, this is a different message. It's not talking about the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which of course the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinite, but that's not what the pasuk is saying here. When the Anshe Knesset Agdela says, of course, they knew about the infinite expression of kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which has no end, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Ein Sof, his midas are Ein Sof, and it says it in a number of places in Tanakh. But the message of this pasuk, where there is the insert of the nun, this carries a different message. This is about us emulating Hashem's chesed in order to bring about the tzmimus and the shleimus to our neshama. This is what the Navi says after the time of destruction, Bahag Golus, and in Yidden entering unfortunate exile. Chazdei Hashem ki leisabnu. The kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is meant to be emulated because leisabnu. Pirish levisha leisabnu she'einanu tmimim u'shlemim. We are not complete. We are not wholesome. Bili shum chet uvgam benefesh, without any sin and blemish in our souls. Uvayla b'salyanim, which has that counter effect on all the worlds, the higher and the lower. The Alter Rebbe says, El Misalyanim, of course, he's trying to say the highest world on our Chman Slad, as we know, that our doings, deeds, unfortunate deeds, which Hashem says not to do, think, speak or think, look or hear, has a counter effect on all, a cosmic counter effect on all the Elamis, Hachiel Yedim. And so to this which we're meant to do and we don't do, sit lax, Hashem says, do this, learn Torah at this time, and we don't do this mitzvah, and we don't, this has as well a cosmic effect on all elements. So because we are not complete, nor are we wholesome without any sin and blemish in our nefesh and ilamis, which even all the way ilamis ayanim, and therefore because we're not complete, meaning to say there is, it goes together. We're not complete without any sin and blemish, or God, Rahman al there is these issues, blemishes and so on. Therefore, we have to conduct ourselves with the kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that unique kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the chesed blikvul, no end, no measurement. Shei blikvul v'tachlis, which again, without any measurement, without any end. Kedila oir aleinu, in order to arouse of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, to arouse this Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this Rachim v'Chesed Ilah, to arouse this mercy and supreme kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Rav Chesed. Again, the higher level of Chesed, not Chesed Olam, but the Rav Chesed of Hashem, the Rav Chesed, and Rachmim B'li Gvul v'Tachlis, and infinite, limitless mercy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It says, when it comes to Rachman, of course it's like Chalu. Of course it doesn't have an end. Because it's Hashem's midas, and Hashem is infinite, so His kindness is infinite, His mercy is infinite. But this will we have to arouse upon ourselves to complete our neshamas, which are lacking, as explained. So we have to do something which would correspondingly elicit this Rav Chesed. How do we do it? We express our Rav Chesed. So again, this Rav Chesed, which we're talking about over here, is the B'li Gvul expressed on the action plane, because usually by Baal Tshuva it begins with the emotional plane, not the regular calling of Yitro HaKadosh Baruch Hu, coming from the deep calling of Yitro from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the life of the Baal Tshuva, which is the expression, by default, the expression of the Baal Tshuva. That's why Baal Tshuva, actually it's good to see Peirik Zayin in Likutei Amarim. Actually, it should be very familiar to us today. In there, the Alter Rebbe this is the calling of the Baal Tshuva. It's in a different type of expression of eliciting HaKadosh Baruch Hu's closeness, for Hashem's closeness. That's the default expression, the cheliyata, which is brought in Zayar, greater passion and greater intensity. But that's more on an emotional level. Of course, it comes to expression in different ways, but it's namely the mamakim krasich Hashem. But in order to elicit, and it also correspondingly elicits a deeper part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why the Baal Tshuva has that extra closeness with HaKadosh Baruch Hu more than the tzaddik. That's why he's able to transform even his advertent sins into merits, which is stupendous. We spoke about it then in another few different times, because it's a different relationship the Baal Tshuva has with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They can't even stand there. It's on a different plane. But that is when it comes. But on top of that, there has to be this expression on a Maisa plane, on an action plane, which is the idea of giving tzedakah without any limit, expressing one's chesed without any limits, which elicits the Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order to clean up, if you will, meaning to say, to draw all the energy which needs to clean up these blemishes and fragmentation, namely these cavities which will remain empty because the person chas v'shalom didn't do what he was meant to do. The yid didn't do what he was meant to do at the time that they were meant to do it. It was learning Torah, doing mitzvahs we learned previously. So we have to elicit this Rav Chesed HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the way we do it, of course, starting from the emotional expression, but then the actual Rav Chesed, in order to Hashem, it should come down all the way down to our neshama. We mentioned also in the end, when you have the B'li Gvul Chesed HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, we ask Hashem that it should come down not only to fill in our neshama, but to make a difference in our life as human beings. And when a person is privy to the Chesed B'li Gvul HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of course, it makes a difference in his Bonachai Mazayna Revicha, success with children, Parnasa, health, and so on and so forth. We mentioned. Let's just conclude over here. We mentioned, just to point out, the overall, over all the years, he did beyond expressing Rav Chesed, together with Mesidus Nefesh, and with our, in our bitter history, which many times it called for Mesidus Nefesh. You can see it today, such a selflessness which was expressed by hundreds of thousands of Yidden. in actuality, and then the Yidden around the world, which are doing whatever they can, or at least they're trying. We should do more and more because everything makes a difference. There's the interconnectivity of one Yid and another Yid, and every success a Yid out there, wherever they are, to be successful in their encounter, in their battle, is based on what I do in any other part of the world. But you can never compare to those who will go out there with complete mindset of self-sacrifice. Of course, Hashem, Am Yisrael is beyond deserving to see that Rav Chesed not only to fill in and to bring the shleimus in our neshamas, but it should make a difference. Lamato, Masarat Vachim is the expression down here on the very physical plane, individually, collectively. We mentioned this in the end of the previous class, and this is this is. Let's see the conclusion of this chapter, of the final two lines over here. Yidden will be redeemed through charity. They will demonstrate their charitable behavior, which will usher in redemption. Even they will not need charity in order to correct anything. Meaning to say, even though they will be exempt from din, from judgment, charity is still the ingredient, if you will, to bring upon the enormity of Hashem's kindness, i.e. Geula, redemption. Because what's redemption? Redemption, of course, will come from a total new window being opened on high from Hashem himself, because that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu exists for all these thousands of years. The only thing is, many times we didn't see it. It was obscure, it was camouflaged, something was really concealed. It's there. That's what we came through over these millennia, over 3,000 years. Since we are a nation, since Matan Torah, before that, from the first Jew, Avraham Avinu, close to 4. So of course the relationship is always there with Hashem, with every Yid individually and collectively, but nonetheless, it wasn't that demonstrative that it was, they didn't have that fluidness, because it was stuck with different ideas, like it's explained. Kabbalah Chassidus, every sin a person puts a layer over his neshama and interferes in the lucidity or that fluidness between him and his Creator, individually, and then collectively. But when Mashiach will come, of course, there will be that total transparency, the total symmetry between Hashem and his people, and that closeness which will be magnified more than any other kindness which you never experienced throughout all of history. Even Shlem time of Shlem HaMelech, which was kind of the most perfect time Yidden had in their relationship with their Creator, which manifests in the abundance of the physical. It says even kesef le'nechshav, even silver it didn't carry any value because of the abundance of Yidden had, again, begashmi physically, but it's the Mashiach's coming is going to be a total different idea, even more than the time of Shlem HaMelech. Because you're talking about an energy, an expression, a manifestation of the true bleak will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, true infinite kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Geula is all about. So when you want to bring Geula, what do? You do something which to tap into this Rav Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which it's stuck on. So even your patur midin, even if you're exempt from din, there's no judgment against you, and therefore not necessarily you have to give tzedakah in order to appease, tzedakah, taksel mimavis, as it says. When there's a decree, you have to give tzedakah, and of course, tshuva and tefillah. This is part of the package, but tzedakah is an important package of it. Tzedakah tatzil mimavis, because why is someone need to be saved from death? Because there's judgment on him or her, or Chman collectively on a community. God forbid. Chman. So you have to do tzedakah is the din, and you have to exempt yourself from the din. So you give tzedakah, but he says no, but it's beyond that. Ein ben David ba, it says only through tzedakah, through a number of things it says, but tzedakah is one of them, because tzedakah has that ingredient. Tzedakah person can give belig vul. You can't shake no point of shaking tululavim. You shouldn't actually shake tululavim. You shouldn't have two mezuzahs on the door. There's no other mitzvah that a person could express belig vul in infinite manners. Is no other mitzvah. You can see and try any other mitzvah. Truma, there's a measurement. Meiser, there's a measurement. Everything has its measurement. Everything has its gvura dimension. Tzedakah, of course, from the perspective of the mitzvah tzedakah, there also is that gvura, that measurement, 10%, 20%, which is a mitzvah minimum of even 20% is called the choicest way of keeping the mitzvah tzedakah. Here we're not talking about the mitzvah tzedakah. Here we're talking about this ability to give. That's a bli gvul expression. That taps into the bli gvul of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinite Ein Sofness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which He's Ein Sof, His Midas Ein Sof, His Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes in a way of Ein Sof. Well, that's what Geula is all about. Again, we don't need to explain. Geula is redemption. Redeemed. There's no part remains in exile. Everything is redeemed. Every detail is redeemed. Every iota is redeemed. Every there's nothing there's no blockage and no level. And again, referring even the Yid versus collectively, there's no gullus within in the particular experiences of an individual Yid, because he's experiencing the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shall it be by every Yid individually, and of course collectively, Am Yisrael, to be redeemed from this gullus, the Beis Hamikdash, Mashiach, and Bli Gvul Tov. Of course, it comes from true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Infinity means infinite. Nothing blocks. When you have that open, transparent symmetry between the world and Hashem's infinity, it's only Kulei Tov. There's nothing blocking, because if it's blocking, and there's a limit to that expression of Hashem's Chesed, it's not the infinite of Hashem's Chesed. So, thus, it's not really Geula. Geula is redemption, Kulei Tov, on every plane, spiritual, physical, emotional, psychological, and every part of Elam Haza will be redeemed. This ruach, it says, it's no impurity, no negative energy, because it's an open window to the Bli Gvul Chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So this is why it says, Ein Yisrael Nigolan B'Tzdaka, Ein Bet David Ba, till, again, associated with the idea of charity, because this is that one mitzvah which we can express in a Bli Gvul manner, and therefore this ushers in redemption, which is all about the expression of the Bli Gvul of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. May it be individually and collectively, Am Yisrael. Again, it shouldn't only be that big march of Am Yisrael. It should be individually, that there should be true redemption by every single Yid in all areas of life, spiritually, physically, and Revicho, like the Rebbe used to say so many times, that the abundance refers to all areas of life, and collectively, all of Am Yisrael, we should be zeicha to this redemption, to this Ben David Ba, Mashiach's coming, B'mheira v'yameinu Amen. Have a wonderful